What's going on, YouTube? I am happy to be back. Got a new small mod for you guys today. So one of the questions that comes up quite a bit and that people often talk about, obviously in the 2016 WRX and STI this is no longer a problem, but let me show you what I'm talking about. Just crank this up real quick. And let me see if I can close this all the way. Here we go. But basically, in the 2015s, you know, now Subaru offers the reverse camera. So if I put this in reverse, we can obviously see that up there in the multifunction display. So everybody wants to know, how do I project a rear view, you know, factory camera onto your aftermarket radio unit? So there's been a couple of solutions out there, mostly for the OEM navigation units, but not many out there for aftermarket, which I have. This is the Pioneer AVH-X5600, I believe. So kind of a lower end unit. I don't need to pay for navigation. I always use, you know, Waze or one of those other apps. To me, that works much better than any aftermarket navigation or factory navigation. But anyways, sorry about that. My dash cam's making noise. But Auto Harness House has created this little harness here, and I'm going to install it today. And basically what this is going to allow me to do is tap into the factory rear view camera to display it on the Pioneer head unit when I put it in reverse. So let me put some of this stuff down. I'm going to go ahead and start by removing, as always, your front bezel here panel with the AC vents. And before my battery dies, I'm gonna turn off the AC and just sweat it out. I'm in Atlanta, so it is extremely hot here. And yeah, this is gonna be fun. So I got up early today just for you guys to try to knock this out. But as always, we're gonna start by removing this center bezel right here, radio bezel, AC bezel, whatever you wanna call it. And you always wanna start from up here somewhere. So these little plastic always help out a little bit, but yeah, it's a little tricky. There we go. So don't pull it all the way out yet if this is your first time. First thing you need to do, of course, is unplug your hazards, your multifunction display control unit, and of course the AC unit down here. So this is a little tricky as always. It helps if you have a little tab or something, a little screwdriver to push up on the top. And I may have to put the camera down because... yeah, I'm gonna put the camera down because I have to sneak up here. It's usually the easiest way to do it so I can actually see where I'm clicking at. So be right back. I'm gonna unplug all the cables and come back. And for those that haven't seen this before, I kind of wanted to show you. If you look back here, that's what you have to unplug. So you just have to basically go in here, push these little tabs down. There's two of these. The one's right below it. You push them down and they'll come off. The one down here is going to be a lot easier to do once you pull the top. By the way, another trick I learned that I wanted to show you guys, I unhooked the top one, and what I did is with my hand, you can push this out carefully, and then it makes it a lot easier to just push on this tab right here and unplug the harness. So I'm going to do that. So we got these two unplugged. Now you just have to undo the AC control unit down here. That one's pretty easy. Just push the tab and you should be good to go. Alright, so we've got the bezel out, as you can see. So it's pretty easy. So you've got one harness and the two up here. And most of you have done this already because you've got an aftermarket unit. There's a lot of videos out there that explain in more detail how to take this out. So another super pro tip is shop towels. I have learned a hard lesson before scratching up my shifter bezel here. So always wrap these things up if you have some laying around, or t-shirts, whatever you've got in place. So the next step, of course, is going to be to get rid of this sucker up here. And this one's always a little tricky. So what you have to do with this one, there's like 6 tabs, I believe. There's 1, 2, 3, and 3 in the back, but they kind of don't clip in. So you kind of have to hook and pull forward, if that makes sense. So kind of like up and forward, but it's a lot easier said than done, of course. And there's also tips and tricks on how to do this. I can never get it to work, so before I break something here. I kind of just like pushing on the where the tabs are, and once I get this out, and again I'm freaking sweating right now because it's super hot, so I can't quite. I swear sometimes it comes out a lot easier. It's like a log today. There we go. So once that pops out, I guess it kind of helps if you do it from both sides. Just pull it back and up towards you. And here you can see all the little tabs, these kind of hook in place, and then 3 in the rear, 3 in the front. Alright, so now I leave the radio for last because the next step for me that's most important is getting the multifunction display and the AC display. So there's 2 little screws. On mine they kind of don't do anything, and I've got the JDM cover here that's got the leather cover or vinyl, I'm not even sure what it is. So I've got these out, and this just kind of lifts up, but again you don't have a lot of room here, and I apologize about all the sweat I'm leaving everywhere. Super hot. You've got two cables which you can't even see, so I'm actually gonna have to take my camera off in order to get back there and unplug those 2 harnesses. But there's 2 of them, and they're kind of tricky to do, so be very careful you don't break or rip something. Would have been nice if Subaru gave you a little bit more room to play there when you get these out. So I'm gonna put the camera down, take it off, and unplug those 2 harnesses, because what you have to do, just to kind of show you the auto harness house harness, I know, long word. This is a little T connector here that's basically going to tap into the OEM one, and then it's going to tap into the harness itself, so it kind of just intercepts that signal. They give you a lot of it, and you have to kind of run it somewhere. I'm going to run it over the top so I can test it out first. This is really easy to plug in. Here you can see this is the actual feed that's going to go to the reverse camera itself. You've got 1 wire here that's going to plug into the head unit's reverse wire, and they're both purple, I believe, at least on the Pioneer, on the harness that I have, so it should be pretty straightforward. And of course you have a ground cable. This is really crucial. If you don't get a good ground with this, there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to be able to get that signal into it. So depending on your radio, some of them it's kind of funky, it'll work even without connecting the ground. So don't let that trick you. You always want to have a good ground. Make sure you find a good ground, make sure you connect it. So that's the harness, pretty straightforward to connect, so we'll do that. I'm also gonna be using this USB splitter in the back because I have a USB output down here. I don't know if you guys can see, it's kind of tricky. And I've got the one, of course, inside of the dash or the center console here. So I gotta set that one up. I want to keep both of them, that way if I want to plug something up front or something back here, it makes it a lot easier. So this is gonna go in the back of the radio, so I can have USB ports in the front and in the back to connect the radio. So I'm gonna take this head unit off, and we'll remove the multifunction display and connect the harness. Then we'll test everything out. I'll remove the radio and do that. All right, we got the multifunction display out. This is a pain in the you-know-what. So here are the connectors back there. Let me show you the harnesses. Hopefully you can see them, but the push tabs are at the bottom. You want to push on this, and again, it's kind of tricky. Once you undo one, you can kind of rotate the unit around and do the second one. So yeah, good luck with that. All right, so here's the connector. So what you want to do is plug this left one in. You can't get it wrong because the sizes are different, so you'll notice that there's only one way to connect it, and hopefully that's right. I've never done this before. Personally I would think that it would be on the right hand side, but that's why I don't make these harnesses, and somebody smarter than me does, right? So we've got that connected. This is going to connect to the back of the MDF unit, which I'm not going to plug in just yet. I'm going to take the radio out and plug up everything else, and then we'll go from there. So this one's pretty easy. I had left my bracket out, so I actually brought my bracket back so I can put this one. This bracket actually goes at the bottom, gives it a little bit of extra support. There's usually 4 screws, I think, on there. I've lost so many of them. I know. Make fun of me that I'm down to just 4. It's always good to have a little magnet or magnetize your screwdrivers there. So take 2 more out. And I've got a bunch of junk plugged into mine. I've unplugged this thing so many times that I don't even bother to... everything's solder in place, but the heat shrink wraps that I used in the first install, I got rid of because I was unplugging this thing so many times. It just made it really difficult. So I'm back to the old electrical tape, like a pro. Can always trust a handy and well-tested electrical tape. I don't recommend you do that, but that is what I use. So this is pretty straightforward. You undo the four screws, carefully pop this out. Again, be very careful because the wires may be tucked back there, and definitely give yourself a little bit of extra room. So let's take a look back here. The reverse camera on this harness, and again I apologize for the bird's nest back here. It is pretty bad. Luckily nobody sees that. This is going to plug here, at least in my Pioneer head unit. It says reverse, what is it, RCIN, reverse camera input. That's what you put in. There's going to be some settings you want to play around with the polarity of the camera itself, like I mentioned, so we'll get into that once I hook everything up. This is my reverse wire, which, as you can see, it's already set up and tagged nicely. Hopefully you guys can see that there in the harness for the Pioneer unit. So I just got to hook these 2 up, hook up my ground, and I'm going to be good to go. The other piece I was talking to you guys about, this is also a little harness I got from autoharnesshouse.com that allows me to retain my USB in the center console. So I bought, I think it's like $10-15. I think you can buy it on Amazon too. I will list the part numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head right now, so I will put that in the description in the comments for you guys to see it. But what I wanted to do now is take this, and I want to split the signal, as I mentioned to you, because I have 2 of these USB. But we'll do that in a second. I'm not too concerned with this one right now. The camera is my main priority, so I will get that going. All right. So let me hook up the wires. Let me hook up the ground, and we'll test it out, play with the radio settings, and I'll be back. Personally, I've been using the ground that I use for the AVC, the module that allows you to retain your steering wheel controls, which is right down here. This one's got a good ground, so I use that one. You can also just do a ground on the chassis, right? You can also run a ground from the battery itself into here. So you've got a lot of options. I'll leave that up to you. As long as it's a good ground, the camera should have enough to power up and work. And in some instances, even without the ground, the harness itself acts as a ground, and it worked. But I don't recommend you do that. So definitely hook up your ground. Put a fuse on it if you can. All right, so let's do that. Let me hook up the reverse wires. Let me hook up the ground, and I will be back. All right, guys, I've got all the wiring connected. So as you can see, I connected the purple wire here to the reverse gear signal input. That was one of the ones I needed to do. I've got my ground hooked up over here. If we follow the ground, this is a ground that I use that seems to work pretty good. And I've got my video signal connected, of course, and I told you guys earlier I was going to be connecting my my little USB splitter here, so whenever I'm choosing between the front one or the one back here, I've got the option to do so. I've ran the wire underneath here. I plugged in the multifunction display, and it's just a matter of plugging everything back up and testing it out. So I'm going to do that here in a second and see how it goes. Remember that you have to go into your radio. Let me kind of show you, at least for the Pioneer head unit. I would check your manufacturer's user guide and all that good stuff. Let me close the door so the chime doesn't drive you guys nuts here. So here we can see a signal already, but basically what you have to do is, let me reset, turn the music down here. When you go into the radio settings in the Pioneer, click your home button. You're going to see first you need to make sure you turn on this rear view camera signal on, but go into system, and in here you need to go, hopefully you guys can see that here. Scroll down till you see camera polarity. I'm using ground, of course, but depending on how you did it, it's going to be up to you. But you've got a couple of choices: battery, ground, off. So just make sure you pick one. On some of the other radios, there's 3 or 4 different options, like positive signal, negative signal. So that's just basically referencing how it's going to trigger the camera to kick on in the back. So I'm going to leave it on ground on mine, and go back to the home menu. Make sure we turn this on, of course. Then once you put it in reverse, you should get the signal. Now I've got to test a couple of things out, because I believe, and I'm going to test that out right now, I'm not going to get a signal till the AC unit kicks on, which is part of what powers this harness. So I need to plug this back up, plug my radio bezel here into the harness so that I can get power to these, and I can get power to the camera. So I need to test that out. I'm not 100%. Like I said, this is my first time doing this, so hopefully that's what it is, and the reason why I'm not getting a signal from the camera just yet. But and the reason I know that is because in the past, obviously, if you unplug that, you don't get, when you put the car in reverse, you don't get a signal up there. So I think that's why I have no signal. So anyways, let me put everything back together. Hopefully that's what it is. Plug the radio bezel in and we'll test it out. So I will be right back. Alright, so we ran into a little snag, problem, whatever you want to call it here. Adjust this down just a hair so you guys can see it a little bit better. So basically, I thought the reason I wasn't getting a signal had something to do with the panel not being plugged in, but that does not appear to be the case. So let me show you guys where I'm at, and let me close the door so this thing stops chiming here. So we've got a signal, we've got video. I'm going to press the home button here on the Pioneer radio. So you can see by this being lit up, it's telling me that the camera has juice, it has power. Went into system settings. I've played around in here with the camera polarity for both battery and ground, which is basically a positive signal or a negative signal or off. Doesn't seem to have an impact. When I put it in reverse, nothing's happening. And I've tried it with the car running and the car off. So that led me to believe that I wasn't getting a reverse signal. If you go into the menu and you click the on manually, this is a feature like if you're towing something and you want to keep an eye on things. Hopefully you guys can see here. If I click camera on, boom, we've got the OEM camera now displaying on the radio just like I wanted. What I don't have, unfortunately, is the trigger. So I spoke to Brian at Auto House Harness. He's been very helpful trying to help me out this weekend over email. And he suggested that I tap into the reverse purple wire here from the harness that he made, which is the reverse signal, into the 16-pin connector, which is next to the radio harness. I know, and I hate tapping into the factory harness, but I didn't have any pins, and I'm just testing it out right now. It's the brown wire, which I believe is the 16th pin. Should be the one at the very end. So the brown wire or the green wire, he said, should send a reverse signal. Unfortunately, I'm just not getting a signal, so I'm not sure if it's just my messy wiring or something else, so I'm going to have to dive in and keep an eye on it. But at this point, I think I've sweated about 20 pounds of water and wasted the whole weekend on this. So I'm going to throw the towel in for now. If you guys have any suggestions or comments, that'd be great. But at least for now, I can turn it on manually, which is not ideal, of course. But seems to be working. You know, much nicer picture quality than the small multifunction display up there. So I'm going to put everything back together and you know, show you guys how it looks finished. But basically, I'm not getting a reverse signal, so that seems to be the problem. So I'm gonna hook everything back up. It should be pretty straightforward. Put this wrapper back on here, kind of protect it. So it's just a matter of replugging everything back in here. This wire right here is for those of you that want to use app radio. Complete waste of money, because you had to buy a bunch of different adapters like I did. Wouldn't recommend it. I would just recommend getting a NEX Pioneer unit. Stay away from the AVH unless you get the 8500, I think, which is the top of the line. But still, I would get a NEX, which has a you know, capacitive touch as opposed to resistive, and it's just so much so much nicer than the AVH series. I mean, I've been pretty happy with it. You know, it's worked, but you definitely get a lot more with, you know, with the other units. So I think I'm on the wrong wire personally, because I've got my little tester light here. I've plugged it in. You know, when I put it in reverse, it should throw up 12 volts and light up, at least in what I know has worked in the past, and that does not seem to be happening at all. So I just think I have the wrong wire. All the, you know, the different posts that I read on Nasiok and all the other forums do say it's a brown wire or a brown and some other color. So maybe that's the issue. I just don't have the right wire for now. So I'm gonna put everything back together. Like I said, I ran out of time for the weekend, so this is gonna have to be next weekend again. I'll have to continue to work on it. About the adapter I showed you guys earlier, here are the two USB ports that I was talking about. So I'm gonna plug this back in here. So I have two ports, one underneath the armrest here, and of course one up front. Plug in my control units. So just go right back here. This is for the steering wheel controls, and one is the microphone. So get those plugged in, got the harness plugged in, got the reverse camera plugged in. I think that's about it. So now it's a matter of tucking all this mess back here and calling it a day. So I'm going to put the camera down for a second, tuck everything back in, and then come back to you guys. Alright, I've got everything put back together here and cleaned up all my sweat as best as I could. So let's crank this sucker back up. Alright, so here we go. So again, make sure the camera's on. Camera's working. Now it'll come on automatically because I have it on right now. Like I said, reverse not quite doing anything. This should trigger it right there. It should come on at this point, but it's not. Now I just gotta go reset my settings since I had it unplugged. So go back into theme, get that pretty Subaru red in there, and we're good to go. I have to reprogram my stations, but I mean, that's basically it. I wish I had better results, you know, for that rear camera, but manually it's gonna have to be for now until I can figure out. So if you guys have any suggestions, maybe I'm on the wrong wire. Like I said, that was based on some of the stuff I read in Brian's recommendation from Auto Harness House to leverage that brown or the green wire on the 16-pin connector, but not having any luck. So again, thanks for watching, guys. I look forward to your comments and feedback to see how we can get it going. But at the very least, you know, we've got it displaying down here as opposed to up here. And as you can see, there's no error messages up there, so you know, this is a much bigger screen, much nicer down here. So anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you guys on the next one. And when I get an update for this particular mod, I'll be sure to share that with you guys.